welcome to the Big Bang Review Show. My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and today this is episode 3, part 3 of our look at Aerosmith's Greatest Hits Collection, which came out in November of 2023. This once again is the band celebrating 50 years. Last time we talked all about disc number 1, which was a great collection of the band's hits from their 1970s era, which a lot of us really love. And that's kind of the stuff that first got me into Aerosmith and first made me a fan. But I'll tell you, if you're an Aerosmith fan like me, you'll want to check this out. How cool is this? Also, as part of celebrating 50 years, Aerosmith got on the cover of Guitar World magazine. How cool is that? Not only we get the great Joe Perry, but we get the double tag team of Brad Whitford and Joe Perry. I can't remember seeing another Guitar World cover like this with both Brad and Joe. How cool is that? So again, if you get this, very, very cool. As an Aerosmith fan, you'll definitely want to check that out. Now, let's get all into talking about the Greatest Hits Collection again. Today, we're going to be talking all about disc number 2, okay? And again, what I love about disc number 2, it kind of picks up where disc 1 leaves off. The first track on here is Back in the Saddle Again. That's one of my all-time favorite Aerosmith tracks. I tell you, every time I see that, I don't know why, it kind of gives me the same kind of feeling as like The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. I hear that kind of thing. Maybe you see it in like a Western film, who knows? But it's a great sounding tune. It's a little different, but I just love Steven Tyler's vocals throughout the entire song. He really is great at what he does there. Okay, now another great track on here is Last Child. It's one of those tracks. It's a little different. It's got a great element of hard rock and blues combined together. I just can't really put it into words, but it's just a kick-ass song. It's one of those songs that maybe it wasn't one of the band's biggest hits, but I sure am glad they included it on here because it's one of those forgotten tracks. Okay, and then we get Kings and Queens. That's another great one. One of those forgotten tracks. I might not have been disappointed if it wasn't on here, but I'm really glad they included it. I'll tell you why. Because it is such a different sounding song. Again, is one of those forgotten tracks I might have forgotten about. I know the very first time when I purchased this and I wrap it, I'm listening to it for the very first time. I put in my CD player in my car on my way to work one day, and I tell you, the track comes on and just, oh, wow, man, I forgot what a great tune that was. Thanks, Aerosmith, for including that. And so, again, another kick-ass tune from the 70s. Draw the Line, to me, this has got a real nitty-gritty kind of, not quite metal, but really hard rock for Aerosmith, a little harder than what they're typically known for. And for that reason alone, I think the track really stands out. And that is one of those tracks, very much like, Back in the Saddle. If they did not include those two songs on here, I would be disappointed. I mean, Aerosmith's got so many great songs, and that's why you got to get this 3-disc version because the 3-disc version's got all the songs that you want to hear. And whereas if you just get the single disc collection, it might be a little cheaper, but man, you're left wanting so much more. And that's why I got the deluxe version, because you get so much, you get every song you could even ever think of wanting. And it really does not disappoint. Now, another great thing I love about disc number 2 here is it moves from the 70s era Aerosmith into the 80s. Now, in the early 80s, Joe Perry and Brad Whitford left Aerosmith, and they brought in 2 new guitar players, Rick Dufay and Jimmy Crespo. Great guitar players in their own right, but you know what? It was a different Aerosmith sound, and not that song, but I tell you, they put out these 2 albums, Night in the Ruts and Rock in a Hard Place, and it was very different sounding. Aerosmith, when they recently reissued these 2 albums, just as a fan, I wanted to kind of get these albums just to check it out as a fan, because I never really heard these albums in their entirety. And I tell you, some of the stuff, like on Rock in a Hard Place, is almost full blown on metal. I can't believe I'm saying that about an Aerosmith album, but that was Aerosmith sound at that time. Very different sounding. Not to say it was a bad album. Rock and a Hard Place. I dig some of the stuff. Just as different. And I think maybe knowing that Joe Perry and Brad Whitford were gone, you still had Steven and Tom and Tom and Joey, but just it was a different sound. And so we don't get any of those tunes featured on the greatest hits. And again, that's why they reissue those two albums separately, because none of those songs are what you'd consider their greatest hits. And so it makes sense they wouldn't include any of that material on here. But what we do get is when Aerosmith reunited in 1985, and the band was back with Brad Whitford and Joe Perry. They put out with Dun Mirrors was not the huge commercial success they thought it was going to be. They thought, hey, we'll get the original five guys back together. It's going to be a smash hit album. It's going to go. Oh, we did not do none of that, but it kind of got the ball rolling, got the band back together. But what they did do on Done with Mirrors, they featured a Joe Perry cover from the Joe Perry Project. Of course, I'm talking about Let the Music Do the Talking, and great track. Aerosmith really did a kick-ass version of that. But again, how could it not be kick-ass? You had Joe Perry back in the fold. Brad Whitford was the original five guys, and they did a video for it. It was not a big hit, but that's the other thing about once Aerosmith moved into the 1980s, they started making music videos. Okay, another great track we get on here is a new updated version from 1986, which predates Permanent Vacation. They put out a music video. We released it as a single. It's a great updated version of Walk This Way with Run DMC. It was a very collaborative effort between Aerosmith and Run DMC. And I really don't know whose idea it was, but you got to give Aerosmith credit, because when they originally released Walk This Way in 1975, it was probably the closest thing to a rap song anybody had ever heard at that time. So I got to give Aerosmith credit and say, they probably released the first commercial rap song that anybody ever heard. Talking about back in 1975 when they put Walk This Way on Toys in the Attic, but this was a different sounding Walk This Way, kind of an updated version. And if you've ever seen the video, you can even go on YouTube and check it out for Walk This Way featuring Run DMC and Aerosmith. Great video, great tune. But I got to tell you, I still love, it's just me, I still love the original version of Walk This Way the best, because that was what I heard first. That's just my take. Okay, but I'm glad they include the updated version here, because for anybody who's never heard it, you get both versions, and that's what makes it so fun. Okay, and once again, as Aerosmith moves into the 1980s, they start making a lot of great music videos. Permanent Vacation was a real comeback album. They hired they brought in like Desmond Child, who's a hit songwriter for bands like Kiss and Bon Jovi. This is the guy who wrote Living on a Prayer, Heaven's on Fire. He co-wrote many of the band's great big 80s smash hits, their radio hits such as Dude Looks Like a Lady, Rag Doll, Angel, Dude Looks Like a Lady. I remember just loving that track from the minute I heard it. And supposedly it had to do with the fact that Steven Tyler has been mistaken. Oh, you look like a lady. You look like a lady. But Steven claims that he wrote the song about Motley Crue singer Vince Neil. Now, how cool is that? And again, I love Permanent Vacation, that album. It was when Aerosmith really had their major comeback. And that album was all over MTV. I remember it, all over the radio. And a lot of people, as Aerosmith's putting that album out, people are checking out Aerosmith. A lot of people are becoming Aerosmith fans for the first time. A lot of people that were not around the 70s, they're hearing like Dude Looks Like a Lady on the radio. They're becoming a fan. And then you got people like me that were around since the 70s. And that's our band. They're coming back in a huge way. And I love that. Aerosmith was one of the bands I loved, and they were getting a ton of radio and MTV airplay. In fact, I seen Aerosmith for my first time in 1987 at the Long Beach Arena on the Permanent Vacation tour. And they featured many of my favorite hits in the set list when I went to see the band. And I got to tell you, another special thing about seeing the band live is, if you can believe this, Dokken, of all bands, was a band's special guest on that tour. So again, I urge people to go out and get Aerosmith's 2023 Greatest Hits Collection. So far, we talked about disc one and disc two. We're just getting started because there's one more disc of stuff to talk about. And so I will check back with you next week and we will do that. But before we wrap up today's episode, I'm Jason J. Rock Houston, and this has been so much fun talking about. But I will tell you, as far as how would I score disc number two, again, I'm going to score it as high as we can score it, 25, and I'll tell you why. What makes disc two so great is, a lot of people might tell you, Aerosmith, they put out some really, their best stuff was put out in the 1970s. But as a diehard fan myself, what I love with disc two is, disc two starts off, like I said, with one of my favorite tracks, Back in the Saddle, okay? And that's one of those great 70s tunes. And then we move right into the 1980s when they had their comeback and all the MTV and radio success. So to be somebody that's been an Aerosmith fan, been part of that last 50 years, this is a real celebration of that. And again, what I've loved about this collection is that all the tunes I love. I mean, there's not one song left off here that I'm like, oh man, why didn't they include that song, or they didn't put this song on? That's why you got to get the deluxe 3-disc collection like I got, because if you just get the single version, you're going to get some great songs on there, but it's a single disc collection, and you're going to be like, man, I wish I'd gotten the 3-disc set, because then I would have had all my favorite hits. Now I'm just getting a small selection, and you'd be left wanting so much more. So again, you want the full package, go out and get this 3-disc collection, Aerosmith's deluxe version of their 2023 Greatest Hits Collection. I will see you all next time for the Big Bang Review Show. We'll do it again next week. See you all later. Take care, my friends.